By introducing myself. My name is Steve Jan. I'm the chief of the Underground Injection Control Branch at EPA Region 5 in Chicago. And I've got a couple of my folks with me tonight, mainly Andrew Greenhagen. I'm getting a little feedback here. Andrew is a geologist who works in my group. And you may have already met Valoria Robinson, who is an environmental protection specialist. She helped to welcome you and sign you in. And also Jeff Wazak is out fulfilling the same function. He's an environmental scientist. Also tonight we have some folks from the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality here. And I'd like Jennifer to introduce herself in just a second. But we worked together with DEQ. Okay, for two reasons. One is there's a federal process underway with respect to the proposed injection well, but there's also a process underway under state law with respect to the proposed injection well. And then secondly, we have some staff here who are work within Michigan DEQ's land office, and I'd like to introduce them maybe before Jennifer and let you know that we're here mainly tonight to talk about the proposed injection well. We welcome all your questions, but we have the most knowledge and we're best able to answer questions about the proposed injection well. But the two gentlemen over here from Michigan DEQ are here tonight to answer any questions you may have about the landfill and historic groundwater contamination concerns. So let me introduce them, and then I think they're going to be sitting at a table out in the hallway. So for those who have questions about the landfill, you're invited to go out and talk to the two gentlemen at the table out in the hallway.
So yeah, I'm Phil Roycraft. I'm the district supervisor for the Waste Management and Radiological Protection Division. And
Jim Staley. I'm geoenvironmental engineer. I'm out of Cadillac, also with Waste Management and Radiological Protection.
So we do the day-to-day regulation of the ongoing operations of the landfill proper. So.
And then you gentlemen will be out in the hall, right?
Yeah, we'll be out in the hall right outside the door. So if you have any questions about landfill operation stuff, come back and see us.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Jennifer Farragon. I'm a geologist and permit coordinator at Michigan Department of Environmental Quality, Oil, Gas, and Minerals Division. Next to me over here is Suzanne Beitman, Cadillac District Area Geologist, also with the Oil, Gas, and Minerals Division. With us tonight are other staff from DEQ who will be assisting with tonight's program. From the Oil, Gas, Minerals Division, this includes Rick Henderson, Field Operations Supervisor, Andy Stemke, Cadillac District Supervisor, Bob Versical, Cadillac District Area Geologist, Bill Dooley, Cadillac District Area Geologist, Mark Snow, Permits and Bonding Unit Supervisor, and Ray Vigrinovich, Mineral Well Specialist. And you just met the folks from the Waste Management Radiological Protection Division.
Thank you, Jennifer. So let me just give you a kind of a flavor of how we'd like this evening to unfold. We've got two segments. The first we call a public meeting, and that's a time when we want to take questions from each one of you. I'll be walking around with this microphone and trying to make a mental note of those who are raising their hands wanting to ask a question, and then I'll hand the microphone off to you to ask your question. And I imagine that many of them will go to Andrew Greenhagen or to Jennifer. And again, these are the lead folks working at the federal level and the state level on the proposed injection well. Before we get to those questions, Andrew and I believe Jennifer have a single presentation they want to share with you to just give you some background information. So that will go till about 7:30, and then at 7:30 we will transition to the more formal part of the evening that we call the public hearing, and we will have a court reporter at that time who will take comments from folks who will come on up. We'll have a microphone set up here at the front, and people will be able to make comments that will be recorded and then evaluated after tonight. When we get to that more formalized public hearing part, we're not going to be responding to those comments kind of in real time, but instead we will take them back to the office and put them together with the other comments we've already received and ultimately prepare a written response to the significant comments. And it's really hard to forecast when that written response might be finished, and for two key reasons. One is the number of comments that we get and kind of the complexity of the issues raised in the comments go a long way to determining whether we can respond to them quickly or it takes a longer time to respond to the comments. So with that, I want to turn it over to Andrew and Jennifer to give you some background information, and then I'll be walking around with the microphone to call on folks to ask their questions.
Point of clarification, the sign-in sheet, was that for the public hearing component or the first?
Okay, so folks have the opportunity to sign in if they choose to, and we ask them to only if you want to make a statement during the public hearing later. And the reason for that is so we can make sure that everybody who wants to comment gets that chance to do so. Or we ask you to sign in, but only if you want to get information from us on this permit application at a later date. If you don't fit into either of those categories, there is no need whatsoever to sign in unless you want to. Okay, so Andrew and Jennifer, you want to get started?
Thank you. So we've got a PowerPoint here tonight. We'll just quickly go through here. Steve already gave the overview of how the evening will run. So in general, the Underground Injection Control Program gets its authority from the Safe Drinking Water Act passed by Congress. So we apply the regulation of injection wells through that act and the laws and the rules and the regulations that come from it. Under that regulation, we have permitting of injection wells, which is what we're talking about here tonight. The permitting and the application process contains components of well construction, the operation and monitoring of the well, and then ultimately well closure, what happens to the well when it no longer has as a purpose. Our program also does permit compliance. So what is that? It's monitoring of the injection well to make sure it's operating appropriately. It's inspections of folks like myself and my colleagues stopping by to make sure everything is indeed the way it should be. And should there be something wrong, we can take the appropriate enforcement actions to remedy the violations that may or may not occur at the site. Here's the UIC permit process in a graphic. We are here in this area now. So the whole process was started by the company coming to us with an application saying we want to have an injection well. Here's our application and the data that supports it. First thing we do is a completeness review, and we go through that, and a technical evaluation to say, does it have the components it needs for a solid application, an approvable application. At that point in time, we make a draft decision to issue or not issue a draft permit. In this case, our decision from that point in time has been to issue a draft permit and put it out for public notice. So any interested party can review the draft permit, make comments on it, and that's the phase we're in now. It can or cannot include a public hearing. You folks requested one, so we are here doing the public hearing. And of course, we're accepting those comments. As Steve said, we'll consider the comments to a final decision. So this particular well is what's known as a Class 1 well. There are different classes of wells depending on the need of the well. So Class 1 is for industrial and municipal waste disposal. There are more than 800 of these across the country, and approximately 30 of those are right here in the state of Michigan. The waste itself is defined in federal regulation, whether it, I've fielded some questions about how is the waste classified as non-hazardous. So in the regulations at 40 CFR 261.3, if you want to look it up, there's a very specific definition of hazardous waste. So There are a number of things that if it were to meet one of those, the waste would be deemed hazardous. If it does not meet any of those, it is non-hazardous. So in this case, the injectate, which is leachate from the landfill, has been tested, and it tests as non-hazardous. So therefore, the proposal is for a Class 1 non-hazardous well at the landfill. The injection is limited to only the leachate of the landfill, with other groundwater or surface water as necessary from the landfill site. No other fluids are permitted to be injected at this well. Generally, just here's where the well is. It is located on the landfill property, and I know that Jennifer or Suzanne later on is going to talk a little bit more about location of the well, so I'll leave that to them. These are the 5 of the things that we're going to highlight going through the presentation here quickly. The first is, what is an underground source of drinking water? So what are we protecting? Some people know it as an aquifer, potable water, fresh water, drinkable water. All of those things are an underground source of drinking water. It doesn't have to be current. It can be a future use. So as long as the quality of the water is at 10,000 parts per milligram or less, it is considered a USDW. It doesn't have to be used right now, but that's the threshold that we deem for future possible use. Here's the geologic setting in the area. So the USDW is about 890 feet deep. That's the bottom of that. Then the geologic formation is the Bayport limestone. During the construction of the well, they will test this. If they happen to find that it's deeper, we do not expect that it's any deeper than that, but if they find that it is, we will modify the permit to ensure that those deeper sources of drinking water are protected just the same as above 890. Down here is your injection zone where the waste is proposed to be emplaced. The top of that is 3,166 feet. And then the confining zone sits on top of that. It's known as the Antrim Shale. 310 feet thick of shale is a great confining zone. And that shale acts to keep the injectate below it. So there's quite a distance between what we need to protect for use of drinking water and where the waste is going to go. An area of review is established around the perimeter of the well. In this case, it's 2 miles. And in that area, we check the construction of other wells or any other artificial penetrations that may enter the ground that penetrate the confining zone. So we check to see how many there are. We evaluate each one to ensure that it is constructed appropriately, that those are not going to be artificial ways for fluid to move upwards, and take that into consideration and make sure that those are all mitigated and protective. EPA also checks for threatened or endangered species, historical properties, water supply wells in the area, most of which are very shallow in that Bayport limestone or above. They don't go down to the confining zone. So we checked all these things. They checked out okay too. Well construction. A lot of times we like to make sure that folks know this is not your typical well construction. It's not like a water well in your backyard. These are built for the depths that they are at. There's multiple strings of steel casing, and in this case, there is to be cement between those steel casings and on the outside of them from the base of the casing all the way to the surface. Here's the well looking at the side view in detail. Your USDW, the bottom of that's up here. 3 steel casings. This yellow is representative of the cement that's behind the casing. So that cement goes between the steel casings and the rock where the hole was drilled to install the well to seal off anything from moving behind the casing. Again, here's your confining zone, your injection zone. Here are perforations where the injectate will come down and go out these perforations into the rock. They install what's called a tubing down the center of the well. That's where the injectate will flow through. It goes through this device at the bottom of the well called a packer. Looks kind of like a donut shape, if you will. That packer goes between the casing and the tubing, seals off this outer gray space here. We call that the annulus space. That is a space that is monitored for pressure changes. It's our first indication. If there were to be a leak, you would see it there first of internal mechanical integrity. We'll get into that a little bit in a minute. But this space is very important from a monitoring perspective to us. So what does the permit require? Specific requirements. There's an injection pressure limit. There's monitoring of the well and injection fluids. Notification to EPA of testing and well problems. There's a plugging and abandonment plan that governs what happens to the well, again, when its useful life is over. And then financial assurance for closure costs. So a concern that folks often have is, well, what happens if the company goes bankrupt and there's this well here? There's $33,000 set aside in a bond that the regulatory agency, as appropriate, can use to properly plug and abandon the well and seal it off should that happen. Other things the permit requires, mechanical integrity testing. So the first one is the annulus pressure, which I mentioned earlier, that space between the tubing and the casing. There's a standard annulus pressure test. They have to do this test before injection begins. If they lose mechanical integrity, if there's any sign of leakage, the first thing we check is this. They have to demonstrate it at the request of EPA if we choose to ask them to do it. At minimum, once every year, they will do this test. In addition to that, continuous monitoring will take place at the site. So automated monitoring once every 5 seconds or 10 seconds, whatever the company sets it up to be, very frequent monitoring. So that's a permit requirement too. Again, the other type of mechanical integrity is the cement outside of the casing. And we require them to check that every 5 years by running a temperature log tool down the hole, or again, at the request of EPA if we determine that one needs to happen sooner than every 5 years. Here's the regular measurement and reporting that we talked about. So monitored continuously and reported monthly are those 4 things of injection pressure, annulus pressure, injection rate, and injected volume. Those reports come to our office and we check them over, make sure everything's okay. Same with the rest of these. Annulus liquid loss, so monthly they monitor this and report it to us. Is there any change in the liquid that's in that annulus space, again, between the tubing and the casing? And then injection fluid analysis. Here's how we know that it's non-hazardous and how we know that it's going to stay non-hazardous. Quarterly, so some items are reported monthly, some items are reported quarterly. So the daily things you have to check are pH, EH, specific gravity, and temperature. And those are what we like to call indicator parameters. So if something were to be changing in the injectate, those would be the first things that would show us that there's a change happening. We would know to look deeper, do more testing. So those are checked daily and reported monthly to us. Quarterly, they have to check 52 parameters, so quite an extensive list, to ensure that it's still non-hazardous and report that to us. We have no reason to believe that it won't be non-hazardous throughout the entire operating life. However, this is just checking to make sure that is indeed true. So for EPA, in summary, EPA protects drinking water by regulating the injection. We carefully review the application and proposed injection well as it was stated to us versus the geology, what we know in the area, all those things. From our evaluation, the proposed Wexford Water Technologies well meets the EPA standards. And again, the permit requirements include construction standards, operating conditions specific to the well, testing, monitoring, and reporting, the plugging abandonment plan we talked about that will require the well to be cemented at the end of its useful life, and financial assurance to fund that well closure should we need to take the action to do so. And I think Jennifer is up next.
So we're here because the DEQ has received an application from Wexford Water Technologies to drill this proposed disposal well for non-hazardous waste. And I wanted to give you all an overview. EPA does have their permit process, and we also have a permit application review process as well. The application's received. The application and the site is reviewed by DEQ Oil, Gas, Mineral Division team, which includes a permit coordinator, area geologist, district supervisor, as well as other Oil, Gas, Minerals Division and DEQ staff as needed. During the review process, there may be some revisions that are required of the applicant to make sure that the permit application and the proposal meets the requirements of Part 625 mineral wells. Once there's a complete application, then the public is noticed that there is a complete application received. And then there's a public comment period in which written comment is received. And again, that may include a hearing. And comments from the public are considered prior to a permit decision. Some of the information that is provided by the permit application, surface site location and impacted areas, drill permitting, the surface location pad, access and flow lines, that's all specified where the well is going to be. Land use and topography is reviewed, as well as soil erosion sedimentation control, ownership and zoning. The information is verified by DEQ that the applicant provides us. The environmental impact assessment takes into consideration isolation distances such as required setbacks from houses, other structures, water wells used for human consumption, and any utilities that might be located. Surface water, wetlands, floodplains, threatened and endangered species, historic areas, and environmentally sensitive areas is all taken into consideration and field verified. Also, reserve pit or tanks for where the cuttings are going to go, how they're going to be handled when the well's drilled. Blowout prevention needs to meet location-specific criteria to be able to shut in the well, be able to handle any expected pressures that would be encountered during the drilling of the well. Casing and sealing is reviewed. Very importantly, the surface casing is for groundwater protection, and we require it to be set 100 feet into competent bedrock and below the lowest known freshwater zones. We also review the sealing, the types and volumes of cement to ensure that there is adequate sealing of the casing between the outside of the casing and the formation. Disposal wells specific, the permit applications have an area of review of the injection interval. For non-hazardous waste disposal wells, it could be 1/4 mile to 2 miles, and in this case, the applicant has chosen a 2-mile radius of review, which is consistent with the EPA application. They provide plugging records of abandoned wells and completion records of producing wells. DEQ Oil, Gas, Minerals Division also reviews the area as well to ensure that everything is identified and reviewed. The geology is looked at both the local and regional scale, and there are geologic maps and cross-sections provided. Aquifer review, injection and confining zone information is also taken into consideration and evaluated. Waste characterization is provided, including analytical of the waste proposed to be disposed and a waste analysis plan. And Suzanne's going to go from here.
Okay, so I think we have 3 more slides. So again, I'm Suzanne Beitman. I'm the field geologist who covers this well, this permit application. So one of the things we did in our initial review when we received the application is, we're here in Cadillac. We were aware of the existing historical groundwater issues emanating from the landfill. So one of the things that we did is we looked at where they had proposed the location. Initially, the applicant had proposed a location where the red star is. I don't know if there we go, right up here. We decided, after some talk internally, that we would like them to either consider adding an extra string of well casing or moving the proposed location to better prevent any potential carry-on that could happen during a drilling process, or to just completely eliminate the possibility of having a conduit that was there just from the drilling process itself. So the applicant, after discussion, decided to actually do both of those things. So they moved the location to where the yellow star is, which takes it out of anything that has ever had any historical contamination. So it's out of that area. And then there's also another string of casing. So for those of you that are familiar with the upper sand and gravel unit and the lower sand and gravel unit and that clay aquitard that goes between those two, that initial string of casing here is actually set at 370 feet, and it's going to be it would be set into the clay such that it's isolating that upper unit from that lower unit. That's just an additional protection because of the history out here at the site. So that's one of the examples when we get applications like this, we really look at it on a very site-specific basis. So something like this, we wouldn't necessarily require someplace else, but because of the conditions here, that's something that we looked at. Some of the other things that fall underneath the DEQ's regulation are secondary containment and surface facilities. So I just have a couple examples up here, pictures of secondary containment, and essentially what this is you have your tank, which is your primary containment, and then your secondary containment is this thick plastic layer that goes around it, so that if there were a leak in your primary containment or your tank, it would be collected into your secondary containment. There's also secondary containment around the wellhead itself, and so the purpose of secondary containment, which is required at wellheads, tank batteries, and a kind of transfer pump and stuff like that, that is to prevent any seepage of any liquids into the underlying soil and groundwater. So the applicant has to include plans for secondary containment to the DEQ and for flow lines, and then we review that and either approve or request modifications to that. Surface facilities also require groundwater monitoring systems. One way to do that is to have a monitoring well that's down gradient of your secondary containment system, and that would have a local hydrogeo study which provides baseline water quality right at that location. Another way to do it is to actually have tertiary containment, where you actually have a third layer of containment underneath that, and your sample port, rather than being in the groundwater, is actually between your secondary and tertiary containments. So that's just like it's just an initial way to monitor that, things are functioning the way that they should. First line of protection, if you will. So just for our operation inspections, field staff approve secondary containment plans. We review flow line pressure tests and any groundwater monitoring that's associated with the surface facility. We respond to spills, and those are cleaned up to Part 201 criteria. We do routine inspections for Part 625 compliance. We're checking the injection tubing pressures and the annulus pressures when we're out to do these inspections, and just kind of give a good look over to make sure they're in compliance in all ways. We continue to monitor and regulate the soil erosion sedimentation control at the well site. We respond to inquiries and complaints, and then the final plugging and restoration of sites. So that's it.
Okay, so it is 6:30, so we have an hour, and I'm now going to walk around the room with this microphone, and folks who have a question, either for EPA or for Michigan DEQ, will have the opportunity to ask those. And again, I'm going to try to do my very best to give all those who have a question the chance to ask the question. This gentleman here, and then second here, I think. And there will be more coming, so here you go.
3 quick questions. One, are these presentations going to be available online that we can find them?
We do not normally post our presentations online. I think if a person contacts Andrew and Jennifer, maybe we could provide them directly.
Point 2, even with a chemistry background, what is EH?
So, are we on?
Is this on?
Okay, let's trade. EH is EH is a measure of oxidation reduction potential. So it's an indicator generally of, can be used for an indicator of metals in a system, if you will. So how likely things are to oxidize or not.
So let's step beyond pH. Okay. 3rd question, how is the groundwater layered somewhere between 300 and whatever and 890 feet? How is that protected as you're drilling before your surface casing is driven?
You want to take it? No, I'm gonna do it. Okay.
So the question was, how is the surface, like how is it protected while you're drilling your surface casing? So the surface casing is drilled using freshwater mud, okay, and it's through freshwater bearing zones, and then it's set into the competent bedrock, which is the shale beneath that. So it's protected by using fresh water and by the dynamics of the mud that are used to make sure that it's, like, is what your question, how? So you create a mud cake from the mud that's being drilled, so it essentially creates a seal where it keeps everything from going out or going in based on the mud properties. So we actually require a higher viscosity when you're drilling your surface casing because it's drilled through unconsolidated materials like the glacial drift and stuff like that, so it's properties of the mud that make it, okay?
I have a question to Wexford Water Technologies and the EPA, the DEQ, that if a document was drawn up to protect any individuals that were affected by contaminated water to their land, to their wells, that they would compensate those individuals with $1 million plus loss of land value if they are so sure of themselves that they are not going to be contaminated.
EPA cannot require that exactly. So what we can do is ensure that the well is constructed and operated and monitored appropriately. Any enforcement actions which may stem from that would be addressed at a later date and with later actions. And Steve may have a few more things to add.
Yeah, and then beyond, so that Andrew is speaking to our authority within, the part of the Safe Drinking Water Act that addresses underground injection. We have authorities elsewhere in that statute and in other laws to clean up contamination that may have occurred in the past should such a situation arises. There are emergency authorities under the Safe Drinking Water Act There is the Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liability Act, also known as Superfund, that give us other tools in the toolbox to address a situation where contamination has occurred. So,
In other words, you're saying that they probably wouldn't agree?
I can't speak to what the proposed well owner might or might not agree to. All I can speak to is what we have the legal authority to impose upon them, and that is the setting aside of the costs to plug the well should the applicant not be able to plug the well.
Have I answered your question?
My question is, how long have we been experimenting with this way, with our water, with the supply of drinking water, with this specific type of well? In other words, how long has this been tried out to determine whether it's going to come back up, finding a weakness in your shale formations or that kind of thing? So what's the history, the length of time that we have tested this theory with?
At least the federal EPA UIC underground injection control program has been around since the early 80s. And certainly underground injection was happening long before EPA began to regulate it. Okay. I just want to speak to you.
Okay, let me go to this gentleman here, and then the lady over there will be the second person.
I like the gentleman's question over here just a minute ago in regard to liability. There's courses apparently set up to pursue for liability. However, the previously when they had the trouble with the landfill, there was water contamination primarily to the north and east. I've owned property for 20-some years south and west. My water wasn't contaminated, but my water was sure as hell cut off because of the rumors and the decrease in value of the land, and it cost me quite a few $1,000s. I wouldn't have saved it anyway, so, but my question now is, if I sell that land today at a reduced and loss of money, am I going to be held liable in the event something happens? And if there's no, if the prior to when the county owned the landfill, as I understand it, and subsequently sold it, there was no restitution made for a decrease in value of land, and I'm concerned that if I sell it to somebody, am I liable, or who is going to be liable?
So in general, you know, I'm not an attorney, and I cannot give you legal advice on what your individual property status is.
But you would advise the public if there was a possibility of wrongdoing may result from this, right?
I mean, EPA does maintain an enforcement website where you can go and see past cases that have been pursued by EPA. Those are posted. If there were to be, you know, a formal enforcement action taken here, such that a penalty were imposed, I believe it would display on the ECHO.
That's correct. So, but I think, from my perspective, your question goes to an area of law, and it's an area of law for which neither Andrew nor I have expertise in.
I don't want to pay lawyers as well as take a loss in property value. And so I can understand. I'm too old for this shit. Have a good night.
Thank you. Okay, over here, and then the gentleman there will be second.
I have 2 or 3 questions. I think I understood you to say in your information that there would be no leachate being brought to this site from an off-site location. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. How many feet of flow lines will be going from the leachate collection point to the well? Do we know?
So-
How far?
That would be, so applicants either can, I don't know right now, so the applicants can either apply for that with the permit, or after, if they did receive a permit, then they can apply for it then. So we don't have the information on the flow lines yet, but we would, should they, prior to them being installed.
And there would be adequate protection of those flow lines, as you explained with,
Yeah, flow lines under our regulation require specific construction standards and pressure testing to verify their integrity.
and do you have any idea how many open wells are in that 2-mile radius that you described that you've looked into as part of your research for the permitting process?
There are no producing wells within the 2-mile radius.
0? Are there non-producing wells? Existing wells that aren't shut or aren't abandoned, or
There is one plugged well.
one plugged well? Okay.
Here and then over there.
I believe there is a producing well right across the road. There's a house right there. It isn't a deep well, but it is a producing well, and also one at the landfill. They have a well for their personal use.
Okay,
That's
let me
producing.
clarify. There is no producing and then there's the one plugged well that penetrates the confining zone.
You say within 2 miles.
Right.
We're not talking about water wells. We were talking about oil and gas wells.
Okay,
Okay.
all right. Because I
So sorry,
misunderstood.
yeah.
I thought it was water wells.
Yeah,
You just have
no,
producing
within
wells.
2 miles, I'm not sure what when we heard the question within 2 miles, I think we all thought oil and gas wells. Yeah.
Okay. My question is, you have 30 of these wells right now in the state of Michigan. How many of these wells, has there been any that have failed? What's your records on this happening? I mean, it must have happened sometime that a well went bad and it had to be corrected somehow. Is there any in the state of Michigan?
So as far as contamination of an underground source of drinking water in the state of Michigan from a well failure, there have been 0 occurrences of that.
So no wells have ever failed in the state of Michigan that you're aware of?
I didn't say that exactly.
But that's my question.
So the most common place that there is a problem at a facility is on a surface flow line. It is generally not the well, and some folks can mix those two together, and they are related, certainly. Generally, from the wellhead down to the subsurface, they are very well constructed, and they maintain their integrity very well.
Okay. The other question is, how much of this so-called non-hazardous can you pump into one of these wells? I mean, you can only pump so much into an area. It's got to go somewhere. It's got to percolate, you would think, and come up, or it's got to find
it goes out
an
laterally
access.
and not up vertically. So as we described earlier, that shale layer that's on top keeps fluid from moving up. So fluid moves to the area of least resistance. So in this case, it moves out away from the well in that injection zone.
Okay, one more question.
And how much can you inject? These have been operating for decades in the state of Michigan, and none of them are what you would, quote, call full. The geology is very continuous and very receptive of fluids.
So we are going to be protected, is what you're saying. When it's being pumped into that area, it's never, ever going to pollute the water?
That is our
Never?
That is correct.
What's that guarantee?
I can't guarantee that.
That's the point.
I will wake up in the morning, but I would live next to it.
Well, you can buy my house if
That's
you want.
your concern, sir. That's one of the reasons why there's continuous monitoring. If there was a change in the pressures, we we'd be right on top of it, and we would know that something needed to be addressed.
So I've got, and Andrew's going to answer, I've got this gentleman, and I've got two in the queue if I can remember them, so please bear with me if you would.
And that's the primary reason why I would feel comfortable being around it, is you've got continuous monitoring, you've got testing that's required, you've got folks that are watching. I would hope that you would take at least some comfort from that fact.
Okay, this gentleman here.
You say when the water goes down, it only goes at a level at that point, but when you're putting pressure to it, it goes up, or anywhere that it can. So how can you say that that stays level when there's pressure? When you say you're injecting it with pressure, which causes it, if it gets any other, if there's that area is filled, it simply goes in other places. With that pressure, it'll also cause it to go up in those different cracks as well.
And so the pressure that's applied is to get it to go down the well and out into the formation. The injection pressure is limited such that it will not cause fracturing of that layer above it. So that's the maximum injection pressure that we talked about. So that gives the assurance that it is going to go laterally. It can go down if it likes. I mean, I don't have that graphic up there anymore, but the thickness of that formation, the injection formation, is much, much thicker than the area where it will be entering the rock. So it will go out, it will expand up and down, it will go out laterally, but it will be within that injection formation.
And how far out are we talking, and how much I'm sorry, I didn't get here early enough to know, I'm sorry? How much can you inject in there? How much room do you have?
So geologically, it's very hard to answer that, but one of the things that you would see if a formation were to be loosely, I'll say, filling up, you would see the pressure of that formation responding accordingly. So as part of the continuous monitoring at the well, the injection pressure is one value they measure. If there were to be a problem with the formation accepting the fluids, you would see that pressure start to rise, and that would be an indication of that. In addition, and so there's a limit on that, right? So that you can't inject above a certain pressure. Additionally, they will do a test every year called a fall-off test, or an ambient reservoir pressure monitoring, where they will shut down the well and they will watch the pressure fall off in that formation with no injection happening. And they do that annually as a requirement, and that's another test to prevent the formation from becoming overpressured or too much. Yes, they measure the injection pressure continuously as they're injecting. That's part of their continuous monitoring system.
Okay, now we've got this gentleman here.
It's okay, you can keep the mic. All right, so far, thank you for everybody showing up. Questions, they're good, appreciate it.
You know what?
One thing though. Can you hear me? All right, again, thank you for everyone showing up and asking questions so far. I do appreciate it, and I'm taking a lot of notes, okay? But one thing I do have a concern about, hearing non-hazardous being used, okay? Well, obviously, that's oftentimes due to a rating amount of material. Can you tell us what's being put underneath there? What does this material, what is it composed of? What is it comprised? So we have an idea of what's actually going through our water supply and below it.
So I don't have that specifically with me. They did submit a sample of, do you have, can I speak to it? Okay. They did submit, as part of their application, a representative sample of what that would be. And it is posted in, actually that is posted in our draft permit online. There's a leachate analysis and there's a number of different things. And I do not have the chemistry background to pronounce many of these things. But you can, if you want to review it, it'll be up here after the meeting. You can view it online. It gives the name of the analyte, the concentration, the limit of detection, the units. So this is available to you.
So is any of this actually not able to be taken care of in more of a biological process? It has to be actually injected underneath the water? So you're telling me that these things aren't metallic, obviously toxic?
The permit applicant has requested to dispose of this landfill leachate into the formation. So we've reviewed their request accordingly. And once the well is drilled, initially there is formation evaluation and testing that can be done before injection is actually, or disposal is actually authorized.
Let me mention one more thing. Let me just mention one more thing. It's my understanding that the leachate now goes to a municipal wastewater treatment plant, and there is some treatment of some of the materials in the leachate that can, as a general matter, occur in a wastewater treatment plant. However, there's a concept called a pass-through. There are some pollutants, I will call them, in landfill leachate that are not removed in the wastewater treatment process and are therefore now being discharged out into the Clam River. And then beyond that, all municipal wastewater treatment plants produce a material that's called biosolid. Some people call it sludge. And I understand that the biosolids from this particular wastewater treatment plant are now being land applied in the community. So in that way, at least a portion of the materials in the leachate are either being discharged to a river now or being land applied, or a combination of the two. And in that way, they're getting out into the environment, whereas this technology is specifically engineered and cited to prevent the materials from getting out into the environment in a way where either humans or wildlife or aquatic life are exposed to the materials.
Additionally, some of the leachate is currently being disposed in a Class 1 well, currently.
And I understand that transporting this actually by truck is probably the most dangerous situation. But can you actually look at that list and tell me, just offhand, how many of the items in that list are actually toxic? Just no.
Well, I can't say that off the top. I can't just look at it and tell you that, because each analysis has a certain toxicity level. I mean, water by itself is toxic at a certain level, right? So, I mean, you'd have to actually look at it and compare it to a criteria, and right here I just have concentrations. So. Yeah, I mean, in the entire application, I don't know if we've said this or not yet, but this entire application is also available on the DEQ website for review, so you can get it there and look at it, but I do have this up front, and you can come look at it afterwards.
Okay, now we've got a question over here from this lady.
Okay, I'm already affected by the original water thing, and I get to pay for crappy water. But who's doing all this monitoring? This daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly? Who's doing the monitoring? Yeah, good.
The permit applicant will be doing the monitoring and the reporting, and the regulators, DEQ, will be going on site to also verify it. So both the regulators and the applicant.
Okay,
Or they may choose to hire a third party to do it for them.
okay, let's go right here. And then I'm going to maybe go here. Did I miss anybody?
I have a couple questions. First of all, we've been talking about Michigan, but has the EPA have any problems nationally with these type of wells?
Again, our knowledge of any groundwater contamination happening from a well failure is zero. There have been some instances of mechanical integrity problems. Those were caught early on from the prescribed monitoring and were able to be worked through, remediated, what have you.
Right. So basically what I'm getting is that you can't tell us what's going to be in the leachates. The people that are making the applications are the ones going to be monitoring it, which means the one making money off it's going to be the one monitoring it. I have a question on what are these in similarity to the fracking injection well systems? Because I know that, for instance, in the state of Ohio, in the state of Florida, Miami actually wound up poisoning an entire aquifer with injection well systems off the fracking well waste. Ohio, if I'm not mistaken, didn't Ohio, people of Ohio sue the EPA because to get the Department of Natural Resources in Ohio to oversee the injection well waste disposal because there was so much contamination involved?
Well, so your first question was, can we tell you what's in the waste? And we can, and this is a representative sample of what the landfill leach. This is a representative sample of what the landfill leachate is at this time, and they will quarterly take samples and analyze them, going forward if the permit's approved. The second part of your question was related to fracking, there are virtually no similarities here. So the injection pressure limitation that is proposed in the permit will prevent them from fracturing the formation. So.
So let me answer this, but there has been no lawsuit where EPA was named as a party concerning, I don't know about that, but EPA has not been sued, if you will, and people who feel that EPA is not following the law can sue EPA, but we have not been sued on the question of. With that, I'm misunderstanding the question. So let me just answer and then. Okay, so what I can say is that EPA does annual reviews of states that have approved injection programs, and Ohio is one of them. And we also periodically do a much more deep review of the performance of those state programs. And I think the last deep review of Ohio's performance was 2015. And that's a report that's publicly available. We're talking about who's overseeing this well. Okay. That's going to be EPA as well as the state of Michigan.
Me.
And
I'm going to be the one that's going out checking on it.
I'm sorry.
So they're going to be doing the oversight of it. How often will you be checking on that?
Frequently. It depends. It just depends. I mean.
And then this gentleman here, I think, has his question.
Okay, I've been hearing this since we've been sitting here. If an applicant just fills out the form properly, he's issued the permit to start. That's what I heard. And I wonder, how can you issue a permit to a company if you don't do a background check on that company, the owners of that company, to see what they have done in the past? Secondly, I was wondering who's responsible for the well. You telling me that the people that are putting in the well that's going to be making billions of dollars over it are the ones responsible to tell you that the water's going to be okay? I don't believe that. Your story that there is no history of contamination. In Texas in 2003, January, 2 semi-truckloads of contaminated waste was dumped into a processing pump under the guise of night, and it's been a problem ever since. There's been over 300 million gallons of polluting material dumped in the earth of the United States since the oil wells began.
So to respond to your first question, the company is currently in good standing with the DEQ. They are not in non-compliance. So in that case, they've provided the adequate bonding and they've submitted a complete application. And we're here taking comment to find out if there's additional comment with respect to Part 625 as far as the permit application goes.
Number 2. Okay, now we have a question from this lady.
Just a couple things. I'm one of the many people that live up in this area. I don't have the water contamination like many of my friends do. But there's a well behind my boyfriend's house that is I think it's the westernmost, maybe well 13, I do believe, that has recently hit higher than it has ever hit with as far as the contamination, and the DEQ assured us that it was going to dissipate. So the DEQ is wrong about that. How can we be assured and be comforted that they're going to be right this time? My second question is, can we stop this? Is there anything that we can do to stop this?
So in regard to your first question, that's related to the landfill monitoring. So I actually cannot answer that question, but either Phil or Jim would be able to.
So EPA will make a decision on the permit application, and again, this is the federal one, and it is for the proposed construction and operation of the injection well. The decision will be to either issue that permit or deny it, and everyone who commented during either of the 2 comment periods or participates in the hearing tonight has the right to appeal that decision, whether it's deny or approve. We follow the law established for us by Congress. Congress determines what we can do and kind of walls off all those things that we can't do. And so we take the facts in a permit application, take the facts that we generate ourselves, and then look at those facts through the lens of the law, and the law determines the answer that we give. And part of the law is to have a hearing like we're having tonight where we get feedback from folks on the draft decision, and then we respond to the comments that we get from folks.
I guess what I'm asking is, does our feedback affect the EPA's decision?
It certainly does, yes.
So if we don't want it, it doesn't have to be.
I can't say that. Okay, what I can say is that we carefully consider all the comments that we receive. We prepare a written response to the significant comments. Sometimes we will change course based on those comments. Sometimes we will do more review than we might have done at the outset. So comments have affected, and they can in the future affect the work that we do and the decisions that we make. Let me go to this gentleman here.
Couple of questions. Number one, who officially owns the landfill?
We understand that to be American Waste.
Okay. Second question then, why is the permit being requested through the Wexford Water Technologies LLC?
So that is a legal entity that someone has chosen to establish, and they have submitted the application. So why that route was chosen, I can't answer. I can't speak for the company.
And what assets does this subsidiary or whatever it is, what are the assets of this company?
Precisely, I'm not sure. So obviously, they've put up $33,000 in a bond, and that's required by us.
And that's peanuts. And what my concern is, here is a company that was established in July of 2015. It is a limited liability company, so the owners of that company are protected for a certain amount. And I would think that I want to trust you, I really do. But I think you ought to be able to answer those questions to tell us this company has X amount of assets that are good for anything that might come up, and they can take care of the communities wherein they're doing this well. Okay, thank you.
Steve, can you?
So let me go here and then here, number 2. Oh, did you? Okay, sorry. So let me, I hear the question to be one of what is EPA's capacity to impose penalties or a remedy on a party that has a permit and, let's say, violates that permit. I don't have the precise figures here, but we can, through the Department of Justice, file a complaint in federal court seeking up to $37,500 per day per violation for somebody who has violated their permit. And then EPA itself can levy what we call like administrative penalties up to $287,000 total, I believe, for violations. So we routinely, well, number one, the thing we do on the most routine basis is we check how folks are doing. Are people following their permits? And we have a variety of tools at our disposal for cases where a person is not following their permits, and that includes these administrative penalties and judicial penalties as well. So that's my answer based on what you were describing. And it might not be exactly on point with what you were describing, but that speaks to what can we do if someone violates the law. Well, that can come into play when we propose a penalty, and we will propose a penalty, and the company is liable to pay that penalty. They do have an opportunity to demonstrate us that the penalty is unaffordable to them, and there can be a negotiation around that question where we will, to conserve our own time and efforts, we may settle for a penalty and resolve the matter rather than taking them to court and spending all the time and resources required to sue somebody in court. It stands for Limited Liability Corporation. Yeah. Let me go here, and then I'll go to the front.
Okay, I wanted to ask about the construction. Why is the second and third actually casings not extended lower than the USDW?
So the second casing does go deeper than the USDW.
But the third one does not, it goes down.
The most shallow one does not, yeah, and that's just, that's how wells are built, you know, with a series of casings to get longer and smaller as you go. That's a way to ensure during construction of the well, you support the geology around it. I'm sure our folks do.
Yeah. We have, for this well, there are proposed 2 strings of surface casing. And the first one that is set at proposed to be set at 370 feet is to be keyed into that clay that separates the upper aquifer from the lower aquifer. Where the contamination is in the upper aquifer. So that string is going to be set at 370 feet in the clay. The outside of that casing is going to be cemented. So there's going to be cement between the formation and the outside of that casing in order to seal off the upper aquifer from the lower aquifer and formations below. And then the second casing below that is going to seal off all fresh water.
I would just think if there's any shifting of the ground, the more casings you have going down might be protecting even better. Also, I was wondering, when you seal that with cement, is the whole thing sealed or is it just at the surface?
The whole thing is sealed. It's actually cemented from the bottom, and then it circulates all the way to the top.
Okay.
So.
Third question is, where is this plugged well that you referred to on here? I'm not aware of it.
It's over a mile away from the proposed location.
Well, I know, but we have it listed here, but I don't have any idea where that would be. North, south, east, west?
It is west.
It's west.
West.
Okay. It's a big area.
Yeah, you're next. Yes. Okay, here's this gentleman, and then I believe I'm going there and then there.
Okay. Can you, on this analytical that comes with this permit, read me the date it was taken?
The sample that was taken was on January 22nd of 2015.
Now, don't you think that's kind of old? Don't you think you'd like to sniff that juice a little bit now? Because it's changed a lot?
So
a new analytical would be nice. 2015 is quite some time ago, and the level of ammonia has gone up considerably. I really wish you guys would refer to this as Wexford Water Technologies LLC, because that LLC carries a lot of weight as far as liability in the law. But now I got this Antrim shale layer. I got a question on that. Isn't that where people sometimes look for oil and gas and kind of use a fracturing technique around Michigan in the Antrim shale layer? Just asking.
It certainly is not in this area.
But it's where they look sometimes?
It is in Michigan, but not in the vicinity of this proposed well.
At this moment, if it gets real good money, they might. Now, the analysis, is that, how do you say that? The liquid around their pressure, that's always supposed to be static? Yeah, I don't know. I'm just done. I'm kind of just wondering on where that's going to go on a daily basis. I really don't like the fact that Fox is telling you guys the chickens is okay. So, just saying.
So the annulus pressure is required to be 100 psi over the injection pressure all the time.
And then you let it drop to make sure it's not going anyplace.
No, the annulus pressure is always required to be 100 psi over the injection pressure. So if the injection pressure is 0, it always has to be 100. If it's 100, it has to be 200, et cetera.
If it changes, you got a problem, right? While you're watching?
Yes.
All right. I earlier was asked about the landfill, the leachate, that it could only be leachate from this landfill that would be injected. Can there ever be a modification to the permit in the future to allow other stuff, other leachate, other landfills to use this injection well?
That's a decision by the owner, and if they chose to apply, they could do so if they wanted.
Could the EPA just limit it right away and say never ever, just this one landfill only?
An applicant can always request what they want to request. We
Okay.
would certainly go through a process to modify the permit, which that type of change, we will be back out for public comment in the same draft permit process that we're doing now.
And yet, I get it. I don't want to be a not in my backyard kind of guy, but you know, if I'm putting it in my backyard, you should put yours in your backyard. You know, everybody take care of their own and not let, you know. So, the list of contaminants that they test it for, who makes that list? I got to be honest, I'm the superintendent of the wastewater treatment plant. We test for a lot more than what they tested on that list for. So, and second question, to follow up, the contaminant that they're cleaning up at the landfill, was that tested for to see if they're injecting that deeper into the ground also? Because I don't think that was on the list.
So the analytical that was provided, that was tested to define whether it's hazardous or non-hazardous.
So it meets the EPA criteria of hazardous or non-hazardous. So it's a
Correct.
set limit of tests for this?
That's what the analytes were Right.
All right, that's what I kind of thought.
And what was your second question?
Well, obviously, you answered it. The contaminant that they're cleaning up in the area wasn't tested for because it's probably not on the list.
They have specified in the DEQ permit application that they don't intend to inject the purge water from that cleanup.
In their waste analysis plan, they actually do propose that they're going to sample for those compounds.
Okay.
So it's an attachment to the permit.
How thick's the clay layer between where the casement, the aquitard, where the first ring separates to protect the groundwater? Do we know how thick that clay layer is, that aquitard?
I'm sorry, between the upper and the lower?
Yeah, to protect the, to keep the shallow aquifer from mixing with the, I would assume it's the intermediate
Yeah,
aquifer.
based on the well logs that I've looked at, it's between 20 and 30 feet thick.
Uh-huh, okay, and it doesn't peter out any place, obviously? Or
Well,
you,
not that, I mean, not based on what I've looked at. We would anticipate finding it around 370 feet.
okay, that's it?
I've got two in the queue, and then, I'm going to ask who, after these two are done, whose hand have I not seen and has been super patient waiting for me? So I'm right here. Where is it?
If I saw right on the very first slide, there was 800 of these in the nation, and so divided by 50 states, we have 16 on average per state, but yet we have 30. So we're already double the national average. Have you denied any of these permits?
So, you mean applications in the state of Michigan? Is that what you mean? So, as far as the national average goes, the first thing that I'll say is Class 1 wells are potentially not, it's not geologically supportive for them to be in some areas of the country. So, Michigan does have great geology for Class 1 injection wells versus some other areas of the country. So that's just a function of geology for what's under your feet. As far as denying applications for Class 1 permits, I'm trying to think back, and I do not recall any since I've been working in the program. But certainly we apply the laws to them, and if one were to not meet the law, we would deny it.
Yeah, and the answer is yes, we have denied permit applications. We've also had instances where the applicant has withdrawn the application. So let me go over here. And then I believe I'm going to go over in this direction, middle section, far left.
Can you hold the microphone for me?
Okay. So one thing I should have mentioned at the very beginning is sometimes folks will offer comments during this part of the evening, and that's fine, but if you want those on the record, please do state them again during the public hearing.
May I ask who here drinks the Cedar Creek Public Water Supply System? Could you raise your hand, please? Pay attention, please. For many years, I've had Thomas Murphy, EPA, Michigan Compliance and Enforcement Officer, Jennifer Crooks, EPA engineer, and Nick DeMonto was their supervisor back in the day. So this is something that's been going on since 2011-ish, I've been calling them. They finally, in 2015, gave me an email response with a bunch of people that are, well, let's, for example, the Attorney General for the state of Michigan, Bill Schuette, DEQ, Scott Conradson. Are you here tonight? That I requested you to be here. Yep, crawled underneath that rock. Also, I see Michael Solomon. Thank you for showing up, Elector for Drain Commissioner Michael Solomon. These people are all involved in this somehow. But in 2015, I received an email back from EPA Michigan Compliance and Enforcement Officer Thomas Murphy. Apparently, and this is what I got to ask you first of all, in 2014, the Michigan Department of Attorney General's Office advised the DEQ that the CCC manual created by the DEQ is not an official, binding, administrative rules document. The DEQ is in the process of making changes to Act 399 that will incorporate an updated version of the cross-connection rules manual that is presently going through the rule-making process. Bullet point number 2. Chapter 13 of the manual suggests that the low hazardous accounts of such a residential be inspected 1 to 4 years, but not a minimum of 10 years. The Cedar Creek water supply system came online in 2010. So apparently, the Michigan Attorney General is going to restore our Safe Drinking Water Act, our Safe Clean Water Act. Now, another problem in the dump is air pollution. We're getting inversion that's just so nauseous that people are gagging from the smell of death in our own homes. But back to Bill Schuette and the DEQ has been working on this since 2014, and they ain't done diddly squat. This is called intimate knowledge that a health code to protect Americans' drinking water from the source to the tap, and Bill Schuette desiccated on it, and you guys know, ever since 2014, our public water supply system is not the only one he's talking about. He's talking about every Michigander. You do not have rights for Part 399 of your Safe Drinking Water Act. But Bill Schuette was called by Thomas Murphy. Thomas Murphy, Jennifer Crooks. Jennifer Crooks is the EPA's engineer. Scott Conradson, coward, where are you? He is the DEQ engineer. They lied to you guys. Not only did Scott Conradson lie to you guys, but Wexford County Plumbing Code Inspector Bruce Finetry, you guys called him on up? He lied to you guys. They also called up Kevin Gunite. He's the Wexford County DPW. He lied to you guys. There and Sheila Hill, Michigan Department of Public Works administrative assistant, she lied to you. You guys called them.
Let me ask you if you have a question.
This is
because I know some folks over here are waiting patiently for their opportunity as well.
So my question is, when is the EPA going to say, hey, Bill Schuette, hey, DEQ, when do we get our Safe Drinking Water Act back? And here's one other thing. Thomas Murphy told me that he doesn't care if Sheila Hill signs a form that the DEQ stamps. She signed a form, says she inspected every one of our houses that drinking that water supply. And she said that she went to each house, she's supposedly trained to inspect for cross connections and look at everybody's plumbing, but has anybody inspected your plumbing, people? Did John DeVozo in 2013 to 2014, did he come to your house and identify all cross connections? No, they sat on their butts in Cadillac West and fraudulently filled out those forms, and you got 50 homes with illegal cross connections that Bill Schuette desiccated on.
So let me answer the question for my part, and then I'm going to move over here. EPA, I don't have the precise date, but it might have been back in the fall, just released a report from an in-depth evaluation of the state of Michigan's public water supply program as approved by EPA back years ago under the Safe Drinking Water Act. That report is available, and it did reflect our assessment of how the state of Michigan is performing in that regard, and included some recommendations for improvement. So who were the patient folks right here who I should call on next? And then I'll note that we've got about 4 minutes left, and I'll maybe take one more person who's been super patient. Oh my God, yeah, I've forgotten all about him. I got to go back over here, sorry. He's been waiting forever. This gentleman has been waiting forever. I'm so sorry. Yeah. Sorry about that.
So first off, Andrew, you said that the topography, or who was it with mentioned topography of the landfill in coordination to the height or whatever. The Cedar Creek lies lower than the landfill. The Manistee River lies lower than the landfill, and water runs downhill, does it not? This state of Michigan, which is the Class A1 non-hazardous, and if you go back through, non-hazardous is what they've applied for. The waste is leachate, the result of rainwater when it gets contaminated at the dump. So that's what we're dumping, contaminated leachate down below. Michigan happens to be worked out. You said it's a great state. We're surrounded by water. Where is it going? It's going into our Great Lakes, correct? I mean, just think about it. And one other thing, Andrew, you said you'd be stopping by occasionally. You're from Chicago, right? Why don't you move up here where it's contaminated already? Come on up.
So it is 7:28, and I'm going to go here, and then I'm going to, yes, go right ahead. And
did you want to talk about topography at all, or I don't think, was there a question related to topography? Yeah. Because, okay.
Because of the height of that, everything, water runs downhill. It does not run up.
We do look at the distances to water features, and we do look at the topography that's on site. We look at the groundwater flow direction, so water does run downhill, but the groundwater does have a flow direction associated with it. So that's groundwater flow is to the north there. So if we were going to be monitoring, if the well were to be installed and we were monitoring a surface facility, we'd be monitoring it in the direction the groundwater would be flowing after it was verified.
So is there ever a chance you're going to get more wells over there, water drinking wells? Is that a possibility?
No, I don't think so. No.
And can I go? And then just real quickly, I mean, it's non-hazardous, but it's still waste, right? I mean, it's waste.
One of the issues that were talked about earlier tonight was the flow lines that will be bringing this contamination in to the injection well. Currently, there are no maps held by the DEQ, the EPA, or the Michigan Public Service Commission for these lines. My question to you is, can this be the first project that you require to hold the maps for these flow lines? That's the first question.
The proposed flow lines for the tank to the wellhead?
Yes.
We have flow line maps like that for the whole state.
Okay. If you say you've got them, then I'll believe you, but I've been told you don't have them, but that's okay. The next one deals with the potential for maybe a time-limited permit. If, in fact, you were to do this, could you make it 3 or 5 years and then come back and review what has happened in the interim process?
That's not how the law is written.
But you could do that. It doesn't preclude you from doing that.
The permit is good for 2 years, and if the well isn't drilled within 2 years, then it would terminate or expire.
But once
if
it's drilled,
if it is drilled within the 2 years, then that activity is permitted until the well is plugged.
And
That's how the rules are written.
And there is no limit on the amount that goes in. The U.S. Geological Survey is issuing new tools. They said like 2-3 weeks ago that they will have them on earthquake and seismic activity connected with injection wells. And I guess from my perspective, this is entirely relevant to all injection wells, including this one. So will those new tools be factored in for the risk in permitting on this well? That's my question. Last one.
Currently, what's factored in as far as seismicity goes is if there is known fault of concern in the area, which there is not, and if the well was connected to any of those faults, which there is not, there's no conduit.
Okay.
So yeah, I want to speak to your previous question really quick. An EPA's permit is a little bit different than MDEQ's. Ours has the 1 year must construct or will expire clause, and our permit is issued for 10 years.
Okay.
So, and we're going to take one more question, and then I think we're going to transition to our hearing.
The last question that I have was that you have about 1,700, as I understand, injection wells in Michigan for the EPA, and you are somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 to 10 years behind in monitoring. Will this be given some kind of priority in terms of that reality?
So we are most certainly not 8 to 10 years behind in reviewing the monitoring of wells. I mean, they report them monthly to us, and shortly thereafter the reports are evaluated and entered into our data system.
Yeah, so let me answer that, and then a lady has asked me to ask another question of Andrew, and then we'll move to our hearing. I actually have the data in my briefcase on like how many inspections did we do last year. And keep in mind that we inspect wells across all 6 of the well classes, and I believe we did somewhere on the order of 700 inspections last year, and we witnessed about 250 mechanical integrity tests. So we're generally in the area, like 900 to 1,000 times when EPA is out on site across all the well classes in the state. The last question, Andrew, is how many people wrote letters to you or sent you emails with comments to this point in time, ballpark?
Ballpark, somewhere between 50 and 100. I have more than one action going. I don't have a tally with me, but somewhere in that ballpark, I'd say.
Okay. So with that, thanks everyone, especially those who are very patient and those who I may have overlooked who had their hands up. Now we're going to move to the hearing, and this is the opportunity to provide comments. I'm going to begin with a brief opening statement. I don't know if Michigan would like to as well. And then we will call the folks who have signed up at the door to make a statement. I think we have 37 folks in total, and that translates to about 3 minutes per person. And recall that this is our second public comment period, so taken together, those 2 comment periods exceed 60 days, and people can still submit written comments to us until Friday. Yeah, and then also when the hearing ends at 9, we will be here, and perhaps the state will be here to talk one-on-one with folks if you have additional questions. To Andrew. Great. I think I introduced Jeff and Valoria at the beginning. They will, at least Valoria will be available to attempt to answer your questions if you have any going forward. And then beyond that, the state folks will be here as well to answer questions. I know, that's over here.
Correct.
I put a file up here. Okay. Are you ready to go?
I'm all set, let's go.
Okay. Let's see. So we do have a court reporter here, and I would ask that when you begin your remarks, you say your name and spell your last name, and that you direct your remarks toward the court reporter so she can pick them up and record them. So let me begin. Let me mention that, going forward for our part, this is where we're going to go all formal on you, and we are not going to be responding to your comments. And I hope folks got a lot of questions answered during the previous time, and we'll be available later to answer questions as well. So good evening again. Thanks for coming. My name is Steve Jan. I'm the chief of the Underground Injection Control Branch at EPA's Region 5 office in Chicago. You've met Andrew. You may have met Jeff Wazak and Valoria Robinson. And as I said at the outside, Andrew is a geologist. Valoria is an environmental protection specialist, and Jeff is an environmental scientist. So this is a hearing, at least for our part, on EPA's proposal to issue a permit to Wexford Water Technologies for a Class 1 injection well. Wexford plans to use the well to inject wastewater, principally leachate, from the Wexford County landfill. So we're pleased to have the opportunity to listen to your comments. The comment period is open until midnight on Friday, the 23rd. If anyone would like to make a comment, either spoken or in writing, they can do so tonight, or they can do so in writing by the 23rd. Written comments can be sent to EPA by email or regular mail, and by that, directed to Andrew Greenhagen. And if you're mailing your comments, please be sure that they are postmarked by the 23rd. So we're holding this hearing in accordance with the Safe Drinking Water Act. It's designed to allow you to make comments for EPA to consider when we're making our final decision. All comments that we received during this hearing and during the current comment period, as well as those we received in the first comment period that ended in November, become part of the official record for the draft permit. We will not respond to your comments this evening. However, we will review all the comments after the hearing and prepare a written response to the significant comments. And the time that will take will depend upon the number and the complexity of the comments. Once that response is complete, EPA will send it to all those who commented or participated in this hearing. And then EPA will make a decision to either issue or not issue the permit final. If EPA issues the permit would authorize Wexford to construct and operate one Class 1 injection well. So we announced the first public comment period on this draft permit back on October 20, 2017. And we did at that time receive comments indicating significant interest in the draft permit, and that's why we're here tonight. We published the hearing announcement in the Cadillac News on February 16th, and we also posted that announcement on our webpage. On the same date, EPA mailed or emailed announcements to interested parties, local government officials, and state and federal agencies. So a public hearing gives you the opportunity to tell EPA whether you feel the proposed permit is consistent with the Safe Drinking Water Act or not, as well as the regulations under that law, and whether the facts, as we've determined them to date, are accurate. Our role is to listen to the comments that are made. The final permit decision may be appealed to a group within EPA that's known as the Environmental Appeals Board by any person who submits comments during either of the comment periods or participates in the hearing. If you wish to make a statement, please be sure that you provide your information either to Valoria or to Jeff. I don't see him now. We will do our very best to accommodate you. Even if you choose not to make a statement but want to receive a copy of any response for the final permit decision, make sure you have indicated so on the sign-in sheet at the table. So going forward, we want to make sure that everybody who wants to say something gets that opportunity. And we have a little bit less than an hour and a half available to make that happen. And so to this point, 37 people have indicated that they want to speak, and that translates to about 3 minutes per person. And if additional folks approach Valoria saying that they want to say something, I might need to adjust that time. You're certainly free and invited to give us any written comments that you brought with you to the extent that you can't cover them during the oral part of your comments. And those written comments can be as long as you like. I'm going to turn it over just in a moment to the state, but we generally begin by inviting elected officials to comment first, since they speak on behalf of many. And then we will call people in the order in which they signed up to speak. So let me turn it over now, and then we will shortly get to the folks who want to comment.
Thank you. The purpose of DEQ participating in tonight's meeting is to answer questions and receive public comment on Wexford Water Technologies permit application to drill and operate a non-hazardous waste disposal well. And we are receiving comment now. Please note that the DEQ public comment period ends on Wednesday, March 28th, 2018 at 5 p.m. A copy of the permit application can be found on our website at www.michigan.gov/DEQ land. The Mineral Wells tab at that link has information on this application and also a link to download or view the application. Please submit any additional comments in writing to our email inbox at deqogmdpubliccomments@michigan.gov or by U.S. mail to DEQOGMD in regards to comments for Wexford Water Technologies applications, P.O. Box 30256, Lansing, Michigan 48909. That information should be on the DEQ handout as well. DEQ will consider all comments made, both spoken tonight and submitted as a written comment. These comments will be considered relative to the regulatory standards of Part 625 mineral wells when making a decision on this permit application. If during the hearing portion of tonight's meeting you have a question, some of the DEQ staff that we introduced earlier will be available outside of the auditorium if you wanted to just, have any questions answered. Thank you.
Let's start. So, as I mentioned, I'm going to invite elected officials to offer their comments first, and I understand that the first person on my list just happens to be a county commissioner, Mr. Michael McCready. If you would, please. And then do please say your name and spell your last name for our court reporter.
Michael Herbert McCready, M-A-C, capital C-R-E-A-D-Y. She's not typing. But my name is Michael McCready, and I have a few questions and thoughts for you. First, and I'm starting to learn how to talk with dentures, so I hope you'll give me a break. Just whose interests are you here to represent? The citizens of the immediate area involved in Wexford County, or the business requesting this questionable permit? Also, please think about the names of your agencies: the Environmental Protection Agency and the Department of Environmental Quality. Please think carefully about this question, because in a few months, those attending this meeting and the citizens of this area in Wexford County will know who you represent here tonight by your finding. Also, please realize that alternative technologies exist to handle this leachate. Second, why is it in that attachment F titled Source and Analysis of Waste, the last attachment in the permit application that you guys looked at, uses figures from January 22nd, 2015, when it's certain that more recent figures are available and could have been used? If more recent figures would have been used, permits, waste analysis section, they could have been very different and probably drastically higher. Now, I'm not a chemist or a trained chemical analysis field, but I can't seem to find any mention in this permit application of one of the basic, most prevalent chemical compounds in the landfill leachate, ammonia. I don't believe that it's even mentioned in the permit application. Is ammonia the most intrusive smell a landfill can produce? It seems funny that on the date used in the permit application in attachment F, source analysis under leachate analysis, January 2015 were used, while a letter Addressed to Mr. Don Schottke, Wexford County LLC, the landfill, guy who ran it. From the City of Cadillac Utilities Department, subject IPP report, Industrial Pretreatment Program report dated 12/21/15, the NH3N ammonia and the F nitrogen ammonia T level was actually 255 parts per million. And for the month of January, an average of 198.79 parts per million were recorded. Also in the remarks on this letter noted violations in level of both nickel and copper. While in January 2017 IPP report, the average was 365.57 parts per million and a high of 438 parts per million. Just why is a deep injection well necessary or even needed by American Waste LLC at the Wexford County landfill, while American Waste owns and operates through subsidiaries, other companies or LLCs? Is that 3 minutes?
Yeah, that's 3 minutes.
Well, I can give you the rest of these, but they got a well about 37 miles away that they could use, that actually the landfill leachate could go in. So I tried.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Do we have any other elected officials?
Right here, sir.
Okay, and who want to speak, I should say. Please come forward if you are.
Good evening. My name is Judy Nichols. I'm Commissioner of District 8, which is Herring Township and Cedar Creek, part of Cedar Creek. Number one, I want to thank you very much for doing this. This is not easy, but it's not easy for the people that are sitting behind me this evening either. A lot of these citizens are here because they're passionate about this exact issue facing them, and some of them are consumed with this. This has been part of their lives for many years. So as you look out on these faces tonight, please look and think that these are the lives you're affecting. These are the lives that you're making decisions for when you consider this request. The other thing, and I'm glad you shared that there were 50 to 100 emails or people that had communicated with you, because maybe those are voices that couldn't be here this evening but want to share their opinion with you. On the other side of it, I want to thank Vicki. I stopped by the landfill today, and Vicki gave me time. She answered questions I had, and I appreciated that. I also asked her how many people stop in and chat with them and ask questions, and not many do. Yes, ma'am? Okay. And I think that's important. I think in my training, dialoguing and talking with each other has been critical into learning, purposes and things that we are facing. So I just want to speak on behalf of these people tonight, though, that thank them for being here and listen to them, look at them, find out their heart in this matter, because they have been deeply moved by what's happening and what their lives have been affected by, including property values and their futures. Thank you very much.
Okay, there's an elected official approaching for a comment. Do we have a second or an elected official in the queue? There toward the back.
My name is Gary, with 2 R's, Brown, B-R-O-W-N. We respect your education, and I, for one, certainly believe in science and what it can achieve and what it can accomplish. However, I've heard a couple of comments tonight that there are a lot of ifs in what we're doing. We hope and pray that this will go off without any hitches if it is approved. But I, for one, would ask you, as the mayor of Manton and speaking for the people of Manton, to err on the side of caution and of concern for these people that are behind us. I live about 5 miles from the site over in Manton, but many of these people have it right in their backyards. I personally am really concerned. I know that human error causes a lot of things that happen when we have problems in wells or water or whatever. There's a lot of human element involved. This is going to be monitored, a self-monitoring system, more than being inspected by you. If you were going to be in there more often, we might feel a little better. But you're going to rely upon this company, this limited liability company, to produce reports for you. And these are going to be subjective reports, and they can be turned in however they want to turn them in. So the biggest issue I see is if we do run into a problem, who's going to bear the expense? Manton has invested a lot of money in infrastructure. If this should migrate to our water system, where we already spend a lot of money, each individual on their water bills, it could be catastrophic, as it is for some of these people. A limited liability is where a person's financial liability is limited to a fixed sum, most commonly the value of a person's investment in a company or partnership. That's what worries me when we're going to give this to a 2.5-year-old company, a permit. Why didn't American Waste apply for this permit for themselves? They have a lot of assets. I don't know what this, I can't find out what this company, this Wexford Water Technologies, what their assets are and how responsible they're going to be. So please err on the side of caution and turn this thing down. Thank you.
Thank you. There's an elected official approaching. Are there any other elected officials who want to speak? Excuse me? Oh, okay. You count?
Good evening. I'm Mike Solomon. I'm Wexford County Drain Commissioner, and I'm also Senior Hydrologist with Restorative Lake Sciences. I've worked in this area for over just about 50 years as also Senior Hydrologist with U.S. Forest Service, so I'm very familiar with the water resources in this area. The water resources of Wexford County are really a unique resource. The deep sand aquifers that are found here produce clean water and even flow that produces rivers that of the utmost and highest quality, and the fisheries from those rivers are also unique. These rivers are cited in hydrology texts around the world that they're just unique systems and they need to be protected because they are so porous and the infiltration in these systems is very quick. There are alternate ways to treat this leachate, including what's been done in the past, the continued treatment at the Cadillac Wastewater Treatment Plant, which is a treatment plant that's been run extremely well for this community for literally decades. Also, evaporation and use of the gas system in the landfill is a technique that's used in many other landfills, and it would be a good alternative. Wexford County Landfill has a history of challenging landfill issues, including groundwater contamination. The citizens of Cedar Creek Township have had a public water system imposed on them that most of them did not want. They were not allowed to have deep wells drilled and paid for by Wexford County because the aquiclude was not considered tight enough or extensive enough to allow those deep wells to exist. So this notion that we've heard up here that this aquiclude is going 30 feet deep and is going to protect it was determined by DEQ not to be adequate to allow wells to be drilled through it for each individual owner. It would have been a cheaper alternative than what we ended up putting in place. Many of these citizens were marginalized and disrespected by those managing the landfill. And that's why a lot of these people are really upset with the way they're going. Their voices, they do not feel, have been heard. And I agree with a lot of them. these citizens have been told in the past that they would not be harmed by contamination. And now we're going to bring waste from at least a third of northern Michigan into Wexford County and treat the leachate at this site.
Okay, we're at 3 minutes.
Really?
Okay, please continue.
All right. Wexford County spent nearly $10 million addressing the landfill problems. We still have continuing liability if anything goes wrong. There is no soil erosion and sedimentation control permit for the landfill. We were talking about one for the well. There's not even one for the landfill. The people that own it need to apply for that permit, and they're in violation of state act. Okay, all the impacted municipalities in this area have passed a resolution against this well. And I think, you know, they represent literally, well, Wexford County has 32,000 people in it, so they represent a large number of people. In my opinion, EPA should look at viable alternatives and prepare an environmental impact statement. You know, this is a significant project, and why a determination is not being completed under an environmental impact is kind of beyond me. We had to do them for timber sales. EPA has the authority to deny this permit, and I believe the citizens of Cedar Creek deserve this action. Any permit that would be approved should be in the name of the owners of the landfill. It shouldn't, in my opinion, be allowed to be passed on to a third party. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I think 2 people volunteered their time, and we only used the time of 1. So one of the 2 can still comment at a later time. Next, I'd like to, this gentleman here, appointed official.
Good evening. My name is Marcus Petcha. P as in Peter, E-C-C-I-A. I'm the city manager for the city of Cadillac, Michigan, and I really do appreciate the time afforded this evening to make some remarks on the record. The remarks I'm going to make are simply some excerpts from a resolution opposing the issuance of this permit that the City of Cadillac City Council approved before the new year as a part of the initial public commenting section. First and foremost, the City of Cadillac community, along certainly with the residents of the City of Manton, where the proposed well site, injection site is, Wexford County in the state of Michigan, we are all very exceedingly concerned about the potential contamination of the groundwater, not just of the lakes and the rivers, but of the potential spread of that contamination throughout the whole area, and the release of the wastewater or the leachate to the environment. We're also certainly concerned with the welfare of its residents and the wider community, the quality and reliability of underground water resources, and the protection of the natural resources in the city, county, and state that are certainly very vital to the growth and economic vitality of not just the city, but also all the surrounding communities. Due to the proximity to and the nature of the water supply and to the lakes and rivers within the city and surrounding communities, the disposal of wastewater and or leachate at this proposed site, we do believe has significant risk to adversely impact, as previously stated, all of the citizens, the environment, and the economy by contaminating the water supply and the incredibly valuable and irreplaceable resources of the city, the county, and the state, including, again, its lakes and its rivers. As mentioned earlier tonight, we do believe that there are superior alternative options that are available for the proper treatment and management of this leachate coming from the county landfill that would not present the same environmental harms and risks The treatment of the leachate currently comes through the city's industrial pretreatment program and is processed through our wastewater treatment facility. We've been doing this for over 20 years, just as an aside, and in 2016 discharged approximately 14 million gallons of treated leachate safely into the Clam River. The following contaminants that were treated and removed from the Wexford County landfill by the city through the industrial pretreatment permitting process through our wastewater treatment plant are dangerous and include known carcinogens and contaminants such as the following: cadmium, lead, nickel, chromium, arsenic, benzene, ethylbenzene, ammonia, silver, copper, and toluene. I heard the buzzer go off.
Yep.
Good luck with the rest of your hearing.
We are at,
Thank you.
okay, very good. Please continue.
Okay, I will be brief. As previously mentioned, the aforementioned contaminants are safely removed and clean water is discharged in accordance with EPA and DEQ prescribed National Pollutants Discharge Elimination System permit limits. Just to recap, therefore, we really do believe, we being the city, as we put it on the public record ourselves through our resolution of opposition, we do believe that there are better or superior alternative ways of treating this leachate. Certainly, we would advocate that the leachate continue to be processed through our wastewater treatment plant. We believe that that is what is ultimately in the best interest for the environment and for the whole Cadillac area. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Now I'd like to call Beverly Monroe, please. And then the next person after Ms. Monroe is Mike Smith.
Steve, I'm on your list. So
Beverly Monroe, M-O-N-R-O-E. I previously asked about why the third casing of your well was not extended below the USDW limit. And I think you said that that stops at the clay layer. I would like to reiterate on what Mr. Solomon said, that clay layer might be 25 feet there, but not too far away. The Wexford County Board of Public Works in their studies found that the clay layer varied a lot, and that there were a lot of gaps in that clay layer. So I think if you were to be wise, you would go much deeper with that third layer and do a good job to start with, so we can eliminate some problems down the road.
Thank you. Mr. Mike Smith, and after Mr. Smith, I invite Jeff Dietlin.
Good evening. My name is Mike Smith. I live in Northville, Michigan, just outside of Ann Arbor. I'm with a company called Digested Organics. We're a specialty company that treats very difficult water, such as leachate. We started our company 2 years ago. We currently have a system up and running in the state of Wisconsin where we're processing 20,000 gallons a day of dairy manure that comes out of a large CAFO type farm. That system has proven very successful. Back in January, we were approached by a landfill in southeast Michigan to take a look at their leachate for treatment. So we went out and took a sample of their leachate, and we processed it at our facility in Ann Arbor, and the results were pretty successful. I have a picture here tonight that I can pass around the room to show everybody. The leachate, I compared the analytical parameters of this leachate with the submission for this well, injection well. The chemistries are very similar with the exception of a few parameters. And we were able to recover 95% of the volume as clean dischargeable water that could either go back into the landfill stormwater pond, or we could obtain either an NPDES discharge permit or a groundwater discharge permit through DEQ with this water. The dark container beaker contains all of the contaminants, the metals, phenolics, ammonia, the typical things that you find in leachate. and only 5% of that would have to go to a permitted disposal facility. So I wanted to come up here today. This is an area that we're aggressively pursuing. Landfill leachate treatment is not just a problem here in Cadillac, Michigan. This is playing out all over the country in Florida. A lot of people don't know that wastewater treatment plants slowly and surely over the last 20 years have changed their method of disinfection. They've gone from chlorination to UV lamps, UV light, which is pretty similar to the lights up here. And leachate is a very dark colored liquid. So it's interfering with the ability of these disinfection lamps to properly do their job. So that's another reason why treatment plants are starting to go back to their landfill customers and ask them to come up with alternative means, and that's what we have. So I'd be more than happy to pass this around the room. I'll be in the back after the hearing's over if anybody wants to talk to us about it. We can certainly come up here and get 35 to 40 gallons of the leachate from the landfill, and we can take it to our lab in Ann Arbor and we can process it, and then we'd be more than happy to share the results with everybody, including the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I invite Jeff Dietlin, followed by Larry Paquette.
Hello, my name is Jeff Dietlin, D-I-E-T-L-I-N, and I'm the Utilities Director for the City of Cadillac. So I actually run the wastewater and water plant at Cadillac. And again, thank you guys for coming. I know it's like we're pounding on you all the time, and we don't mean it that way, I don't think. Up front, I want to say we get paid to treat the leachate. So just getting that out of the way, the city does receive a payment to treat the leachate. But I think the best management practice, that's something we do, would be to treat it now rather than bury it and hope over time that it gets treated going through the ground. And we have the ability to treat it now. We have been treating it now. And I heard somebody made the comment that currently the landfill's trucking waste away also to another well. We can take more at the landfill. We can't take it in slugs, but if it's a steady diet, at one time we were getting 70, 80,000 gallons of leachate a day from the landfill, but they were running 7 days a week. So we were taking a huge quantity of leachate there that now that they're bringing it during the week only, we have to build up to that a point where we can take it at the wastewater plant and actually treat it. Another one, we heard about the testing and the pass-through. We test for a lot of stuff there. We test for the NPDS and our biosolids. We actually produce a Class A EQ, exceptional quality biosolids, which you can put on human food crops. That stuff is tested a bazillion ways, and we do not see any effect from the leachate on this product. We could actually take this product, it's a fertilizer, and we could put it on a human food crop by the EPA's permission, and it would be okay. So the leachate isn't affecting us there. Again, if possible, it'd be great if we could limit the leachate that, if it is in this well disposed, to only this landfill. If the EPA would say only this landfill, only this time, no modifications on the permit, that would be great. I know maybe you can't, but again, the fear is that it's going to draw outside leachate from someplace else, and we'll be doing other people's business. And last, somebody talked about the IPP violations that the company had. Again, violations happen, but the cadmium was talked about, and I don't know what the other metal was. Again, we recapture that at the wastewater plant. We reintroduce that back into the nature as a micronutrient for plants to use to grow. So actually this stuff, after we process it, it isn't as bad. It's good, actually, once we process it. But I guess that's all I have to say. So, thank you.
Thank you. Larry Paquette, followed by Daniel Sutton, please.
Do I need to spell that for you?
It's P-A-Q-U-E-T-T-E. I am a neighbor
of the landfill. I've been dealing with this for half of my adult life. Eddie and Mike, you've not been good neighbors, and you know it. You've destroying our lives and our properties for the sake of a $100 bill in your pocket. That's all they're doing this for. So you've all you spoke about ifs. You were on TV, you spoke about ifs. If this is done, if they follow the rules, if everything is done right, if, as an engineer, I've been all my life, if doesn't cut it. It doesn't work. If is just, it's an if. So now you're asking if. The history of this landfill starting in 1970 was, if you do this, it won't get contaminated. If we put it there, it won't get contaminated. If you have 500-foot setbacks, it won't get contaminated. Nothing will go wrong. The history isn't there. It's not going to happen. The if is if and when is when. If, when this will happen. And it will. Andrew, I understand you're from Chicago. You don't live here. You don't care if it's in your backyard. You're for it. You told me, it takes numbers of people. If you get a great number of people here, maybe we won't let this happen. Is there enough people here? I don't know how many people it takes. Is it 10, 20, 30? How many lives? I don't know. I can't trust Eddie and Mike. I'm saying your name because I want them to know who you are and not as American Waste or not as Wexford Water Works. They're people here. This is people. It's got to stop being about money at some point in time. I've had it up to here. I warned the Board of Commissioners a year ago. I said, call Eddie, it stinks. It stinks to high heaven. Les called you. Every morning it stinks. He called you. He called you every day. I warned you, Eddie. We will sue you. We will do this again. We'll go through the whole thing. And then we'll have to drag you guys into it. And we'll have to drag the DEQ into it again. We're tired. It has to end. And you guys can end it for us. Just this one little injection well. There's, what did Michelle say, 30 in the state? What's one more, huh? It's not needed. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Daniel Sutton, and then John Fuscone. Fuscone, excuse me.
I'm Daniel Sutton, S-U-T-T-O-N. I'm a half a mile out my back door from the dump. My statement is, the state of Michigan is on one of the largest clean water aquifers in the world. It's surrounded by 1/5 of the world's freshwater supply. And I sit here in this room, and I hear the DEQ and the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, saying that it don't matter. They're going to dump this stuff in the landfill. The landfill's going to push it down the ground, and you're trying to convince us that it's never going to come back up. That is a bunch of crap, as far as I'm concerned. Our grandchildren's children will be dying like flies, and you guys won't be around here to see it, but you don't care. That's what's bothering me, okay? The people at the landfill, see, I believe that if you got to work after dark, what you're doing is not right. The landfill has banging up there 24/7, all night long. Keeps us awake. We wake up, sounds like they're already putting the well in to me. You guys say that they're going to govern themselves. I'm sorry. That's not adequate protection for the people. I mentioned once before, and I'll give you this report. In 2003, there was a injection well, and big oil companies decided they had contaminated waste they had to get rid of, and they backed it up to the well. Nobody done anything about it. Dumped it in there, and that's it. We the people I have owned my property since 1971. I didn't buy it to make profit. I bought it because it belonged to my wife's family. We want to keep the fresh water in Michigan here. We don't want contaminated water. You can't say you can protect us from contaminated water because the dump has already contaminated 51 households around my area. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Foscone, followed by Nancy Scungio.
Good evening. John Fuscone, F-U-S-C-O-N-E. Thank you. I believe Gary, Mike, and Marcus have all covered this very well. They understand and explained the problems. But I think the real issue here is money and only money. The company, American Waste, that's all they're in business for is to make money. And by the additional costs that they incurred with all of this leachate that has escalated since they bought the landfill because of the amount of waste that's going into that landfill today. And with the additional 90-plus acres they intend to, put in the additional cells, like the cell H, which is under construction, and under their operating, their plan, they have 9 more cells along Old 131. The leachate is going to multiply. And what's the answer? Dig a well, put it in the ground. They could care less. They just want a profit, but at our expense. And that's what I'm concerned about. They're not here. We don't know what's going to happen 20, 25, 30 years from today. It could be a problem. You laugh. It's an issue.
I'm sorry, the computer malfunctioned.
Okay, but I mean, that's what we're concerned about. There's no guarantees here. The bond protects you people, but there's no protection for the residents. None whatsoever. And that's what I'm worried about. Thank you.
Thank you. And after our next speaker, we will have Wendy Johnson, please.
Hi, my name's Nancy Scungio. It's spelled S-C-U-N-G-I-O. I'm here to talk about my neighbors and my family. We have a beautiful area that we live in. It used to be much more beautiful. Long Lake used to be a wonderful lake that my father, my grandfather, all fished in. They all hunted that area. They can't anymore. We can't anymore because of the contamination. I wouldn't dare have my husband or friends of mine fish in that area and feed that to my grandchildren. This is what I'm here for, my grandchildren. I understand you say this is safe. How do you know 100%? You don't. My friends live with this every day. They have had their wells contaminated. They've had to have their wells capped. How do we know that's not going to make it to my house? That's not even a mile from my house. Our state is a beautiful freshwater state. We are getting all kinds of waste from other places that should not be coming into our state. Put it in your own state or your own country. We need to stand up for what we believe in. From what I've heard tonight, I honestly do not have any faith that this will be turned down. I don't have any faith in that. And I should be able to say that my vote, my tax money that pays for everything that is to be used to make this determination, it is not being used to save us. and our children and our grandchildren. And it should be. We should be able to decide whether that well goes in or not, and we are not the ones deciding it. Thank you.
I have nothing written. Anyways, Wendy Johnson, I'm Cedar Creek Township resident, and I have been involved in this from the word go. My property was initially going to be in this wrap area. I was going to lose my 75-foot well, and we have fantastic water. Luckily, the plume was not coming my way, but I'm about 1/8 of a mile away from any contaminants that may be moving my way. I saw what it did to the people in our area. It turned them against each other. It got nasty. We were against the county, all the entities. It was ridiculous how nasty it got. Recalls, whatever. Talking lawsuits. In fact, we were involved in one. But what Mike Solomon had to say, and I'm not even going to try and pronounce your name. I would really love you to listen to them. I have grandchildren growing up in the area. I would like it to remain the way it is. I would like you to tell them, no, they cannot have it. And one of my big concerns is if that well is allowed, and I don't have much faith in government that they're going to watch out for me, that will and can they petition you, which I believe was asked, to bring in more stuff from other counties, other states, other areas, and use that well beyond what it is being intended for now. I don't know. I just really would like you to say no. It has been nasty, and you're asking the people to go through it again. It's, you know, this is not a one-time thing. It has been going on for years, and we are sick of it. We are tired of it, and feeling we have to protect ourselves and hope that you guys will protect us.
Thank you. Mr. Anstett, would you like to use your time? Okay, thank you. Is it Shane Anstett? Thank you. And then after Ms. Anstett, we will have Gary Grammel.
My name is Shani Anstett, S-H-A-N-I-A-N-S-T-E-T-T. I have more of a question than a comment, kind of combined. The comment was made that as it stands now, they're not allowed to bring leachate from other areas. But if that dump takes in garbage from other areas, is that not the same as leachate from other areas? Because that's what that garbage will create, is leachate from other areas where we don't have control of what's in it. My second question is, it's being labeled as non-hazardous now. Is the Class 1 well able to be requested to then accept hazardous waste in the future, or does that require a different class of well? And I didn't hear that question asked earlier, so those are my comments and questions.
Thank you. Mr. Grammel, followed by Steve Piwarski.
That's Gary Gremmel, G-R-E-M-E-L, resident of Cedar Creek Township. They applied for the well LLC, the company itself, which is a limited liability, so they can't go under American Waste, which kind of covers their big operation if they applied for under American Waste, which is still not right. They should do it under their own name. They are expanding that landfill as it is right now. That's why I think they applied for this permit to do that, because they know there's going to be a continued amount of leachate that's going to be going out through that. Why don't they, if they're going to spend some money on a well, run a direct line? They can do directional boring with the same type of well that sends it right to the wastewater treatment plant. Hence, no trucking, just run a rate direct. That's 10 miles they go, 10 miles, that's it. That would eliminate the trucking. There'd be no hazard on the road. we'd be able to monitor that just like they have other pipelines and things that they monitor. You know, you having the monitor, it's just like a fox watching the hen house right now. That is not right. I just don't understand it at all, but that's a good way. And they have proven that the leachate that goes to the treatment plant is the safest, best way to do it. And I know there's going to be more of it, but maybe they're going to have to up their productions at the wastewater treatment plant, or they put in their own wastewater treatment plant, locate it, and then return it back to the Cedar Creek or something like that. There can be other alternatives. Thank you.
Mr. Pawarski, followed by Rita McNamara.
I'm Steve Pivovarski, P-I-W-O-W-A-R-S-K-I. My comment is the amount of money required for bonding this project is not nearly high enough to recompensate for the millions of dollars of potential loss that will be shouldered by our grandchildren when this thing fails in the future and starts percolating up through all the shale and all the magic stops that, unknown to you guys, have weak spots in them here and there. You just don't know about it yet. I also believe that our current process for processing the leachate is not adequate, but the deep injection well is not a good solution, and all that does is drops the problem onto our future citizens' lap. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McNamara. And then after Ms. McNamara is, I invite John Bennett.
Rita McNamara, M-C-N-A-M-A-R-A. The question I'd like you to keep in mind tonight is, when do the people matter? We've all seen the charts, the graphs, the computer models. We've been told how safe these wells are. 1,000,000 chance of leaking, according to one industry spokesman. But when you dig a little deeper, you find lots of theory and very little hard data. Even though there are thousands of deep injection wells, both Class 1 and Class 2, which are structurally identical in the U.S., the EPA didn't centralize its data on these wells until 2007. In an update 5 years later, it was found that less than half of the state regulatory agencies had reported into that database, and many of those reports were incomplete. Even with just a fraction of the injection wells reporting, a review of 220,000 well records found more than 7,000 leaking wells and 17,000 violations. These wells leaked in Arkansas, Ohio, Colorado, Kansas, Tennessee, Louisiana, Kentucky, Wyoming, Pennsylvania, Texas, Oklahoma, California, Florida, West Virginia, and yes, Michigan. That's why 17 states have banned them. According to one EPA employee, quote, "We're not going to know what's going on with these wells until somebody's well is contaminated." Little is actually known about deep rock formations, how waste fluids move down there, or how to track them. Stephen Finsterly, a leading hydrogeologist at the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory and a recognized authority on deep rock formations, said, quote, "There is no certainty to any of this, and whoever tells you the opposite is not telling you the truth. Equipment failures, improper operation, and casing cracks can allow contaminated fluids to percolate to the surface, often through old or unplugged wells. Those of us who live in the risk area around the landfill know a lot about failed computer models. We know a lot about things that are never supposed to happen until they do. If these wells are so safe, let state and federal agencies indemnify every resident within the risk area with a contract that offers a buyout at today's fair market price if their properties become contaminated. Are they willing to take that 1 in a million chance? Regulation is strict on paper but poor in practice. Regulators rely mainly on reporting from the well operators themselves. American Waste says they plan to pump, quote, non-hazardous landfill leachate into this well. I challenge any of you to drink a quart of it. I got about 20 seconds left. And then tell me it's non-hazardous. Why is American Waste seeking to install an expensive hazardous waste injection well, which is what a Class 1 well is, if they don't intend eventually to pump in hazardous waste? And will you be doing tanker inspections or overseeing this well? We don't have contaminated groundwater because of leachate hauling. We have contamination because of poisons pumped into the ground when you allowed the landfill to operate unlicensed for nearly 11 years. You failed us. Please don't do it again. You know these wells leak. By permitting a deep injection well, you become knowing partners in polluting our land and possibly our groundwater. Residents and every one of their representative bodies oppose this well. It's a threat to health and safety, a threat to property values, and a threat to the county's financial stability. And I ask you again, when do the people matter?
Thank you. Charles Bigelow, and then I invite Christopher Crane.
Sorry, you said Bigelow?
Bigelow, yeah.
I thought you said Jonathan
I'm
Bennett.
so sorry. Okay, yes, you're correct. And then
Okay.
Mr. Bigelow.
Okay, Jonathan Bennett, B-E-N-N-E-T-T. The community is united against this proposed well, including 4 official resolutions by local governmental units. Yet, MDEQ and EPA tonight and previously have stated that the permit will be granted if the applicant meets all legal and regulatory criteria. This is the same type of regulatory malpractice that led to the poisoning of thousands of people in Flint. The final report of the governor's Flint Advisory Task Force issued a haunting warning. It concluded that in the MDEQ, quote, a culture exists in which, quote, technical compliance is considered sufficient to ensure safe drinking water in Michigan. This minimalistic approach to regulatory and oversight responsibility is unacceptable and simply insufficient to the task of public protection, end quote. Why should we trust regulatory agencies when years of their negligence at the landfill led to contaminated drinking water which traumatized residents? The proposed injection well would be drilled through the same aquifer from which some of us can still draw unpolluted water, water that has won numerous national and state water quality awards. This proposal re-traumatizes us with the very real possibility that residential wells outside the existing contamination zone will be poisoned, ruining our drinking water and forcing us to use substandard public water, increasing our cost of living, further stigmatizing property values, and causing irreparable harm to the environment. Why should we trust regulations that promise to protect human health and the environment, but which are outdated, rely on self-monitoring and self-reporting, and have been proven inadequate time after time? Why should we trust that what has happened in other places won't happen here, like in Romulus? Residents there successfully fought for 15 years to prevent a deep injection well in their already environmentally compromised community, just like we are. But in 2005, regulators granted the company a permit to drill the well. Within 10 months, the well failed and leaked. The EPA shut it down and later discovered the company had violated numerous permit conditions, but it was too little, too late. Why should we trust deep injection well science based on unproven theoretical modeling and conjecture? We don't know what's happening down there. What happened in Romulus is not an anomaly. Many deep injection wells have, in fact, failed and leaked hazardous waste into the environment, some into drinking water, such as in Florida. Finally, why should we trust American Waste or Wexford Technologies LLC. Most failures in deep injection wells have resulted from installation and operator errors or outright fraud. Anyone want to give me any more time? Most failures have resulted from installation and operator errors or outright fraud. Why should anyone trust that American Waste will be any safer or honest? This company is not a good neighbor. They are polluting the air with noxious odors, the roads, woods, and private properties with blowing trash, residents' peace of mind with construction noise 24 hours a day, and they have inadequate controls over what materials are dumped into their landfill. In its permit application, they claim that they will only be injecting non-hazardous landfill leachate, but in fact, this leachate is a toxic soup of garbage juice made of diluted hazardous chemicals. And now, even though they have safe existing alternatives, they're proposing to dump it down what is essentially a deep latrine where they want us to believe the danger will be out of sight and out of mind. Why would anyone trust that American Waste will be satisfied dumping only landfill leachate? What will stop them from getting exemptions to dispose of other types of hazardous waste in their Class 1 hazardous waste well, such as industrial, agricultural, medical, pharmaceutical waste, creating a new income stream for them, but posing further risk of harm to us and the environment? American Waste is asking that you put their economic interests ahead of the interests of the community and environmental protection. But neither they nor you can provide any credible assurance the well won't result in harm to human health and the environment. And we are unwilling to be guinea pigs in a failed experiment. I'm almost done. The Flint Advisory Task Force recommended that the MDEQ be, quote, driven by a mission that is aspirational in nature so that Michigan can have the safest drinking water in the nation, rather than merely aiming for technical compliance with regulatory requirements, end quote. We demand, and environmental justice demands, that the MDEQ and the EPA follow this recommendation in our community and deny the permit application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just a quick note. I show 17 additional folks who want to speak, which does not reflect those who gave up their time, and that would work out to, and so I'm going to ask folks to keep their time to 3 minutes. If I do call your name and you have given up your time, please do let me know. Thank you.
Mine will be very short then, so I can take some of my time. My name is Christopher Crane. Last name is spelled C-R-A-I-N. I am a resident in Cedar Creek Township. First of all, I want to thank you actually for having this meeting. And I know sometimes how it seems very aggressive, especially on your end. I've been on that side of the table before. And I do appreciate that you actually provide a meeting that's at a reasonable time that people can attend to, unlike 7, 8 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, which occurs oftentimes in other states in different situations. I'd also like to thank again everybody that actually showed up today. Actually, I appreciate your civic engagement. It actually warms this old paratrooper's heart, and I'm very proud of you at this moment. And I'm sure I'll be proud of you as this continues on. That being said, everyone's, with their statements, has provided their feelings, their considerations, and also how they feel about this and why this shouldn't go through. I do understand that, also being a resident in this area for quite some time and also my family, part of this trash is my trash. Before someone said about, not being this person that talks about not in my backyard, I am known that a lot of this trash is coming in from other areas, other areas. And always there's a fear that, again, that they're going to bring in even more material. That being said, my well is just under 2 miles away from this proposed site, And I know that barely falls in within this range that you actually review. But unfortunately, there's also another well that's less than a mile away from me, And supposedly this permit will allow them for at least 10 years, I believe, to, at least from the EPA standpoint, to pump in to the ground. How do I now know, or not, how do I know that this well won't give it an opportunity to get to the groundwater? This is just considerations. Also, it's not just the people, or you have the people in the very close vicinity that are going to sit there and their children drink this water, their grandchildren drink this water, all right? My family members will be drinking this water, okay? But also, I was born in Flint and raised in Flint. I have family still in Flint, okay? And what has occurred there has decimated their lives, okay? And not just the people that are in the very clear area of the city, near the river, et cetera, so forth. But you're talking about people in Flint Township with property values. People even in Grand Blanc, northern Grand Blanc, their property values have collapsed. And because of that, they actually have to worry about how they're going to afford education for their kids. Something else to be considered, all right? It's rings, these rings of effect continue on. And that being said, I will surrender any amount of time I have left to the next person. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bigelow, followed by Sharon Blackford. And after Ms. Blackford, Dennis Patrick. Followed by Kim Boyle. Excuse me? Kim Boyle. Okay, thank you.
I'm the guy that fought the landfill for 7 years, Ron Dextrom. You can look me up.
Can you spell your last name for me, please?
Dextrom. They poisoned us for 7, 8 years. We tried to get them to stop it. We had to fight the county, the Cedar Creek Township, everybody else, DEQ, everybody in the DEQ. They lied. I could name you, young lady, there is no clay down there. We went 500 feet and never found any. So whatever you got up there, it's wrong. There isn't 2 aquifers. If there was, we would have had deep wells, wouldn't we? And not only that, but they put 30, 40 test wells in illegally, single case wells. They said they were going down through the clay into the second aquifer to test it with 1 well case. That's illegal. You all know that, right? You can't get down to the second one without poisoning it, can you? So you don't know anything. You're standing up there rambling on, but you're getting it all wrong. You don't know, and you weren't here for it. I contacted you people in Chicago. I got letters from you. You said, go get them. But nobody in the EPA come and helped us. Now, why are you sitting up here saying you're protecting us now? They fed that water to my kids, dude, to my kids. And everybody I rented my hall to, they were at weddings drinking the water with TCE in it and DCE and everything else. Now, how in the world do you expect anybody to stand up here and say, oh, go ahead, put the well in, you're fine? I told the Ascione boys what they were going to do 7 years ago, that they were going to haul it in there and dump it under us, because I seen it done in Detroit. And I went around the EPA with the company I was doing it with, just like they're doing it. So the EPA is not going to protect us. And you have no idea where that water's going when they shoot it down there, because water goes places where nobody knows. You can't go on killing people. You will go to hell. You can't say, oh, I go to church every Sunday, but yeah, I think the water's going to be okay. You'll be fine. Go ahead and keep drinking it. Do not allow them to put it there. It will gain nothing except make them more money. Please don't let them allow it. You can't do it and then go to church on Sunday. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen Turnbull, followed by Joanne Porter. And then third, we will have Wendy Nystrom.
Hello, my name is Karen Turnbull, Karen, Turnbull, Turnbull, and I'm a member of the Michigan Citizens for Water Conservation. And I believe that we have a disease and a symptom And the symptoms I know very well because I live right down the road from where Nestle's taking out of our water, the potash mine. And I have a beautiful cottage on Beaver Island, and if Pipeline 5 breaks, it's in danger. So I know about the DEQ and the EPA, and I know that the disease is, as you said, we follow the law. And I know all of you guys are in this, your DEQ and EPA, because you went into this because you care about the environment. But you follow the rules of the people above you. And when Governor Snyder first started, he changed the mission statement of the DEQ to say they will grease the skids of corporations that want to do business in Michigan, make it much easier for them. And it has. There's not been an injection well that's been denied. I don't know of one. And I've been studying about them also. And there are laws coming up right now, and there's Senate Bills 652, 653, and 654 that will take more. It will take more from the DEQ so that you'll be able to do less, and it'll give more to corporations to change the rules and skip the science. That is really wrong. Now, I would like to remind you that our water, it's a nonpartisan issue. I don't care what your political background is, you care about your water. That's what I say, we really need to pay attention to who we're voting for in November. The EPA has made promises tonight, but guess what? Michigan would like primacy over injection wells, meaning they want just the DEQ to do the injection wells. That is wrong. I'm sorry, but we need both of you well-funded to be a well-funded regulatory agency and not less, which is happening. So altogether, I'd like to say you must deny this permit. All of the government agencies, local government agencies here has said they don't want this. And when are we going to talk about we the people? The government's supposed to be between we the people and the corporations. We the people are on the top, corporations are on the bottom, the government's between, but it's flipped. Corporations are on top, we the people are on the bottom, and that is wrong. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Porter, followed by Ms. Nystrom. And third would be Mr. Osterhoff, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Osterhowski? Excuse me? Okay. So Ms. Porter is not coming forward, I take it? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Wendy Nystrom, N-Y-S-T-R-O-M, and I'm also with the Michigan Citizens for Water Conservation. And I have been going to many of these injection well hearings, and I would like to know, and by the way, injection wells, just to let everybody know, which you all know, are underground toxic dump sites with no containers. And in a state with the most important resource that the world needs and we need, I cannot understand, we have 1,700 injection wells currently that cannot be monitored properly. We do not need to add any more injection wells. I am calling for the DEQ and the EPA to set a moratorium until we can do a water assessment, because we have lots of poisoned water already in our state, and we don't want to poison the Great Lakes as well. We need to protect this water for the future, and allowing injection wells does not protect the water for our future. So I'm asking you to please, so we can do some water studies in this state before we put any more injection wells in. I don't even think you do random testing for water wells where injection wells currently are. We need more laws to protect the water, because I'll tell you something, every business, everything we do needs water. These people are coming here to our state because we have lots of water. If we put in stricter guidelines for them, they will still come here and provide the jobs. Plus, we can create more jobs with scientists so that these companies can take care of their waste in a better manner than dumping it underground. I like the gentleman that said underground latrine, because it has to stop. When it goes underground this deep, it's out of sight, out of mind. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Mr. Ostahowski, followed by Ken Boisseau. Okay, thank you. And then the next person will be David Bontz, or Bunce, perhaps.
Hello, my name is Jeff Ostahowski, and I am with Michigan Citizens for Water Conservation. I do want you to follow the law, and you have to. One of the great laws that you have is the pollution prevention program, the pollution prevention law, and basically it states that you should treat pollution, not bury it. The industrial treatment program, that's the collaboration between the state government and the federal government, is probably one of the shining examples of science over time and hard work by lots of people to protect our communities from contamination, toxins, and chemicals that frankly can hurt us. We're already doing this in this case. This leachate is being processed by the very program you set up. Continue to do that. I'm reminded of two movies back in the 70s that I can't seem to get rid of, but one is The Fistful of Dollars and the other one is For a Few Dollars More, okay? So what you're doing is spreading risk for that money, and you're spreading the risk all over this community, and there's no assurance that it will in fact work. And the trust that you have that it won't work, or that it will work, comes back to bite them very hard if in fact it doesn't. You already have the problem solved. Continue to do that and deny the permit. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Apologies if I'm mispronouncing. David Bunce or Bonce, followed by Diane McGurkin. McGuckin. Okay, thank you. Then let me move on to Mr. Chuck Volkner. Okay, thank you. Skip Gorner. Bob Lohman. Ellen Sosinko. That's a combination of not being able to read and pronunciation. Okay, and that would be the last person. We do have 5 minutes remaining. Is there a person who wants to speak but did not sign up? This gentleman, please share your comments.
My name is Fred McNabb, SMC, NABB, Cedar Creek Township. It's not when they're going to bring in more leachate. It's not if they're going to bring it in, but you know if they're going to bring it in. And by bringing it in, they're going to be putting more down there. Is that going to they're going to have to increase the pump, which then will start fracking. Then all the leachate is going to come up to the top. That was my comment. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I should have asked, is there anyone who did sign up to speak but whose name I did not call? Okay, and is there a second person who now has decided, there are such folks? Okay, please come forward. There's two.
My name's Mary Hallett, Hallett. I am Cedar Creek Township Treasurer. I have been with the issues with this landfill since day one. I've been treasurer for 17 years. This landfill has created a lot of turmoil, a lot of problems, a lot of nightmares for the residents of this township. I am very much against an injection well. I feel that it will only cause more problems. I don't feel it is safe. I've done a lot of research. There's all this possibility of spills in the holding tanks. Where do you think that's going to go? Down into the ground, down into the water. And the water in that area, and what's going to happen with all the drilling? Is that going to kind of vibrate and make the plume move further? I mean, any turmoil into that soil, I would think, would make the water plume move, which would then increase our RAP area, which would then increase very many more residents. I am against this. I know I've already emailed you guys, but I felt I should speak out again tonight and let you know that I am against this.
Thank you.
My name is Adam Coleman. I live in Manton, Michigan. My mother, Nancy Scungio, was here earlier, and I really don't understand how this is okay. Look in this room. Human beings that are going to be affected, that are going to be saddened, ticked off if you go through with this. I'm a football coach in this area, so not only do I have concern for my, nieces and nephews, and someday when I have kids and grandkids, but I have concerns about, football players I coach, every single one. I cannot tell you how strongly I believe against this well. And I implore you to listen to every little comment that was made tonight. I implore you to read every email, every mail that you have gotten, and really consider this. I have not heard one positive thing from this community about this well. So please take that into consideration, because we don't want it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are at time, and so I'd like to thank everyone once again for your comments. Thank you for your time commitment in joining us here tonight, and that will conclude our hearing.